Hello, beautiful friends. I am Laurel Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while you deepen in your connection with your beloved team of angels who love you so. So this podcast is here to help create a sense of sanctuary and light, so that as you transition from your waking life into the deep mystery of sleep, that you do so in this loving, sweet, sacred space that the angels are creating for you. If we're meeting for the first time, I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I am here to help you open to your gifts, to the brightness of your spirit, and your innate magic. And I do this through one-on-one angel sessions and soul mentoring and a variety of classes. And tomorrow or the next day when you're online, you can look me up at illuminatingsouls.com. You can sign up for my mailing list and you'll hear all about what I do during my waking hours. But when it gets to be time for sleep, I listen to sleep podcasts and have for the past few years. And they have become an essential part of my wellness. And that's why I was guided to create Sleepy Bedtime Blessings for you. You deserve a good night's rest. And there is something that is so precious about getting to fall asleep while a soft, loving voice keeps us company. You know, many of us grew up listening to a bedtime story, having someone read to us. And it's a very sweet experience. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while and are enjoying it, I'm so grateful to know that this is supporting you. And if you're at all guided to support the podcast, I invite you to think about leaving a review on iTunes or Google Play. The reviews help others discern if they want to listen to the podcast too, or even if you want to share this with people you love, that would be awesome. Thank you in advance. But for now, it's your time to rest. So I invite you to take a deep breath in and out and cozy on in to your favorite sleeping position, fluffing the pillows just so. I say pillows plural because I sleep with a lot of pillows. I am a girl who loves comfort. So I love it when I can have multiple blankets and pillows. I sort of build a cocoon for sleeping. So whatever you do to get comfortable and cozy, I invite you to snuggle on in. And I'm going to chat with you for a little bit, and then we will call in the angels who are already here. You can feel them. They're here. And then I'm going to read to you. And you don't have to stay awake the whole time. Actually, my hope is you're starting to drift off already. But the angels and I will be with you, and you'll be hearing my voice for the next hour or so, but the angels will stay with you all night. So one more big deep breath in, and just letting go of whatever was just sort of hanging on with you from the day you had. Just let it go. Whatever it is, you can pick it up again tomorrow if you need to. But for now, this is your time to replenish and go into that beautiful place where dreams live. That beautiful expression of rest when our bodies get to restore themselves. And where hopefully we get to experience a brighter tomorrow in the morning. And before I started recording, I picked an angel card for us so I could tune into what the angels wanted me to share with you. And a card came up. Miracles. Isn't that the best? So the angels will be infusing this broadcast with the divine energy of miracles for you. And I think we grow up thinking that miracles have to be extraordinary and beyond our abilities, But miracles also show up in the sweetest ways that can be so gentle, we might not even be aware we just experienced one. Some of you may have heard me share this story before. Several years ago, I was flying back from Chicago to Northern California, where I live, and I was on Southwest Airlines. The only reason I mention that is because it's open seating and you never quite know where you're going to sit. And so I sat down first, and an older Indian gentleman sat next to me. And I'm not a really good seatmate when I fly. I don't want anyone to talk to me. I want to go into my bubble. I want to be left alone. I want to read. And I'm not terribly social when I travel. So I went into my bubble and I was reading. And at some point I had to go up to use the restroom. And as I came back, this gentleman used it as an opportunity to start talking to me. And I almost kind of did an inner eye roll. It wasn't anything he could see. I just inside, I was like, oh no. See, I'm not always a nice person. And he wound up being an extraordinarily amazing, sweet man. And this is where the miracle comes in. So as I sit down, he hands me his Time magazine. And he points to an article. And he says, I think you'll be interested in reading this. And the article was about how different packaged goods companies were starting to print affirmations on their products. So this would have probably been around, 2007 or 2008. And there was a company called, Aqua Mantra, I think, and they printed affirmations on their bottles of water. And there was a chocolate company that was printing affirmations on their wrappers. And this was the article he handed to me. And I looked at him and I said, do you know what I do? And he said, no. And I told him. And he said, oh. And so we started talking. He introduced himself as Mr. G. his last name was a very long last name. He said that nobody could pronounce, so everyone called him Mr. G. And his parents helped found the Theosophical Society back in the early 1900s in India. So the Theosophical Society was an amazing spiritual group that brought a lot of Eastern wisdom and traditions to the West. You may have heard of Madame Blavatsky and others. They talked a lot about metaphysics and mediumship and auras and extraordinary materials. So if you haven't ever researched the Theosophical Society, you'll be amazed at what you find. So he grew up with all of these concepts swirling about, and his parents would hold the meetings in their living room, and different teachers and thought leaders would come and speak and teach. And I was sitting on this plane flying over the country, absolutely amazed that somehow the universe had orchestrated this moment. And he really was amazing. I wonder if you can even feel his energy as I share about him. One of the most authentically joyful people I've ever met. And at one point he said to me, people ask me, Mr. G, do you believe in miracles? And he laughed and he says, no, I depend upon them. Can you feel that energy? No, I depend upon them. And I've carried that with me ever since. Now, a part of me would almost wonder if that was true. Like it was such a cool experience. I wondered if it had even really happened. But we had exchanged phone numbers. And he wound up leaving me a message on my voicemail, and also mailed me a care package of some articles he wanted me to read. And so I have proof Mr. G really existed, and we really had that exchange. So whenever miracles come up as an invitation from the angels, I always think of Mr. G and that exquisite moment where somehow he knew he needed to open up and invite me into a conversation with him. Isn't that amazing? So, as you drift off, I'm affirming the angels are infusing your path with miracles. You don't have to give them the marching orders. God knows. God knows in the infinite heart of God how best to support you. And your job is to open and receive and allow it to be so. So take a breath in and release. And I'm going to call in the angels, but I have to say they are already here. And I'll tell you how I know. So, if you've ever taken a class with me, especially recently, you'll know that I run really hot and cold physically. I'm either freezing or I'm burning up. The joys of being postmenopausal. If that's TMI, I'm sorry. But what happens is when the angels come in and I start to channel, I get so hot. And right now I'm underneath the blanket fort and I'm so hot. It's so hot in here right now. And that tells me the angels are here, my friends. Oh, my friends, they are so filled with love for you right now. Just let it come in, okay? Just know and trust that the angels are here. And so, beautiful angels on high, we know you are here, and we ask that you join us in ways that feel tangible and filled with light and joy. And we're so grateful for this opportunity to be reminded of the miracles that are here with us now. And here is what the angels would like you to know. They are saying that they are here for you forever, always. Since before you drew your first breath, your angels have been with you. They see you, they know you, and they love you. They love you beyond time and space. They love you exponentially in ways that it's hard to comprehend from our human experience. They see the wholeness of you. You know, sometimes as humans, we see ourselves through our personality self, which is just a small fragment of who we are. They see the magnificence of you. So, beautiful angels, we ask that you clear our energy fields through the heart of God, assisting us in becoming even more ourselves than ever before. Please help to energize our authentic self, the one that remembers our magic and our abilities. And angels, we open our hearts to the miracles that are here for us. Please help us to open our ability to receive as we open to deeper states of grace and the awareness that God is working on our behalf. So take some deep breaths in and out and allow yourself to receive. So, beautiful angels, we are so deeply grateful for this moment. We are so grateful for the opportunity to shower prayers and blessings on behalf of all who are listening to this message. Please allow them to see the true beauty of their hearts. Please help to clear from them anything that they no longer need to carry in service to their highest and best good. Please bring forward the deepest levels of healing and light so that we can blossom open into the next adventures that life brings our way. Please help to bring us sparks of inspiration, allowing our creative spirit to open up, allowing our magic to come online, bringing to us wonderful experiences of support and friendship and companionship and intimacy, so that we walk through this world knowing that we are loved and cherished. Because, dear one, you are precious in this world. And there is so much about you to love, truly. So take another deep breath in and out, and allow your body to relax all the way down to the tips of your toes, just allowing your calf muscles to relax and letting that relaxing energy move up towards your thighs, up to your lower back, your torso and your shoulders, coming up to your chest, your neck, all the way up to your head, just allowing your brow to smooth out as the angels connect and clear your crown chakra to make it easier for you to connect with the divine. As you drift off, divine love is streaming to you now. It is here to nurture you and to bring healing light. So while you rest, I'm going to tell you a story. So tonight, we're going to do a blended approach to the bedtime story. I'm going to be reading to you from a book I found that is called Marshall Field and Company, A Life Story of Great Concern, that was published by the Dry Goods Economist back in 1922. The name Marshall Field may sound familiar to you, or maybe you haven't heard of it before, but Marshall Fields and Company was an extraordinary department store in the Chicago area. And regarding the book, I haven't read the whole thing. I'm not sure why it's a story of great concern. I don't think there's a dark twist in it. That may just have been the way they spoke back then about certain things. The part of the story I'm going to read to you isn't necessarily about Marshall Field, the man, because there was a man who founded the store and that's his name, but more about the early days of the start of the department store. So if you grew up in Chicago, you knew about Marshall Fields. It's a high-end retailer that always had the best of everything. And their flagship store was in downtown Chicago on State Street. And as a little girl, it was a big deal to get to go downtown and go to Marshall Fields. We usually would take the train. And I remember going down with my mom and my grandmother. And back then, this would have been the late 60s, early 70s. You dressed up to go downtown, so the trip to Marshall Fields usually involved party socks. And if you were a little girl of that era, you likely know what I'm talking about. The white socks that flipped down and had some lace on the end, and usually they were slipped into a pair of patent leather Mary Janes. So I have beautiful memories of Marshall Fields, and we would go downtown, and I even think I carried a little pocketbook, a little girl pocketbook. Again, I seem to recall it was patent leather and white and fit on my little wrist. And the train would pull up, and we would get out and go into the store, and I seem to recall that we would enter through the basement, and the basement at Fields was a thing. And I don't know if we'll get to it tonight, but there's a chapter about it that I'll read to you at some point. And we would go to the Walnut Room or the Wedgwood Room. They were both cafes that they had, and they were extraordinary. There was this huge, huge Tiffany domed ceiling. And at Christmas, they would erect a giant Christmas tree. And it was a seasonal treat to get to go downtown and have lunch under the Christmas tree. And here's a little bit about my personal experience with that store. So I decided that I wanted to work in television. I shared with you about that on another episode, and I enrolled in a art school in Chicago, and one of the ways you would move forward and hopefully getting a job when you graduated was to get an internship. And I wound up getting an internship at Marshall Fields in their corporate video department. So way back then, companies would have their own in-house video departments that would make training videos. And in the case of Fields, they would make videos that would showcase new product lines coming in. And I was able to get an internship there, which was so cool. I got to know a lot about the history of the store and the layout of the store. And the store was huge. It took up an entire city block. And I think it is 7 floors of retail space. And then the 8th and 9th floors, one was corporate offices. And that's where I think my office was. And then I think the 9th floor was where they had the candy kitchen. I may not have the floors exactly right, but a little aside about the candy kitchen, shall we? Because Marshall Fields was famous for Frango mints. If you know, you know. Chicago, growing up in Chicago, you knew all about Frango mints. They were just delicious, succulent, melt-away chocolate, minty goodness. Now, I should mention that Marshall Fields was later bought out by Macy's, so the State Street store still exists, only now it's Macy's, and I think Macy's makes the Frango mints, but I'm sure Macy's is a lovely store. It just doesn't have that, warmth of heart in my life as Marshall Fields did. And what was so cool was, I've always been a foodie. I don't know if you know this about me. And I don't eat sugar anymore, and I wasn't eating sugar when I worked at my internship. And the reason I mention this is because we could go up to the candy kitchens and see them making the Frango mints. And they had a big cutter, like a wire cutter, where they would cut the pieces of candy. And there was always an uneven edge that would fall off into the box. And I remember the candy makers holding a foot-long block of Frango mint to me, saying, "You want some?" And I had to say no. I always remember that. I worked the whole internship and never ate a single Frango mint. I don't know how I did that. And Marshall Fields was known for extraordinary customer service. There's even a book that was published, I think in the 50s or 60s, called Give the Lady What She Wants, because that was the way they handled their customers, was to make sure people were pleased. And to really set the stage for the part of their history we're going to explore, you have to remember what it would have been like in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Most times people would shop at a local store, a dry goods store. People were making their own clothes. People didn't have an opportunity to travel as much as we do now. If you were wealthy, maybe you would go to Paris to get clothes for the season, have them shipped back. It was a time before there were a lot of visual aids. If you look at any of the Sears catalogs from the early 1900s, they are artist renderings of clothing. So to be able to go into a grand department store and see merchandise displayed in ways that were really compelling was an experience that was really just coming here to the U.S. There were several grand department stores of that era scattered across the country, and Marshall Fields was the one we had in Chicago. So we're going to pick up the story. Marshall Field will actually have already passed away by the time we start reading, because the story I want to share with you is not so much about Marshall Field, the man, although his life is interesting, but the birth of the Marshall Field store we came to know and love. And again, if you're from Chicago, you'll probably know about the Field Museum, which was endowed by Marshall Field. If you're not from the Chicago area, it's the Field Museum of Natural History It may have a different name now. An extraordinary museum. And I believe the building was left over from the World's Fair. It's a magnificent building. And, as a kid on field trips and things, you'd go in and you'd see the dinosaur skeletons and things like that. And that was Marshall Field who endowed it. He was succeeded in the presidency of the Marshall Field Company by John G. Shedd, which, again, if you're from Chicago, you know of the Shedd Aquarium, which was endowed by Mr. Shedd. So here we have two of the philanthropists who helped fund the major museums in the Chicago area, Marshall Field and John G. Shedd, who each in their own way helped birth the Marshall Fields we came to love. So this is where we're going to pick up our story. So we're picking up the story during the time that the State Street store was developing. So this is probably the early 1900s. It starts. Swift elevators had replaced the two slow cars of earlier years, and with the increase of floor space, the number of elevators had been increased proportionately. The display window space had been greatly augmented by the new building on State Street, as well as by the annex known as South Wabash. In 1893, tea rooms had been installed. These had a floor area of 82,000 square feet, and daily some 2,500 guests were served. Rather tight quarters, apparently, but in those days people did not look for the space and freedom of movement that in the modern high-class restaurant are deemed essential. There had also been provided a restroom for customers with writing desks, stationery, and other conveniences. An innovation in the department store of that time, and therefore peculiar to Fields, was a comfortable restroom for men. For the employees, there were restrooms, a library, and an emergency hospital. There had also been a marked expansion of the wholesale business and its organization. In directing the construction of the South State Street building, Mr. Shedd was insistent on having it different from other large stores. To this end, he caused to be installed within the light well or rotunda two extraordinarily beautiful and costly domes of Tiffany art glass, one at the roof and the other between the 6th and 7th floors. The lower of these domes is the largest piece of iridescent glass mosaic work in existence, and is a constant source of admiration to thousands of visitors to the world's greatest retail store, exceeding in its iridescent radiance the famous Taj Mahal in India. The upper dome, being at the roof, is illuminated by natural light. The lower dome sparkles with brilliant illumination and has all the appearance of reflecting and diffusing the sun's rays. The lighting is furnished, however, by electric lamps placed so as to bring out the beautiful iridescent glow. The upper dome makes a canopy or ceiling of sparkling and varicolored beauty, overhanging a beautiful fountain, which adds a wondrous charm to that deservedly popular portion of the many tea rooms. Among the noteworthy features of the Marshall Field and Company store is the large number of special rooms for the showing and sale of merchandise. When Mr. Shedd was directing the erection and equipment of the additions to the store in 1906, he realized that the attractiveness of merchandise is in a great degree dependent on the surroundings amid which it offered to the public. He saw, too, that if the higher grades of goods were given an air of privacy and of specialization, they would appeal more strongly to people of wealth and refinement, and furthermore, that such customers would appreciate the privilege of being able to make their selections undisturbed by the passing throng. He therefore caused to be constructed in various parts of the storerooms of a decorative character, yet in the best possible taste, each of these rooms being devoted to goods of a certain kind. And inasmuch as France, more perhaps at that time than in the present day, was the source from which came the most exclusive merchandise, an air of La Belle France was given to each of the rooms, and they were known familiarly, and still are, as French rooms. There is, therefore, a room for imported lingerie, another for the finest examples of needlework and infants' wear. There is the salon in which fine gowns are exhibited. There is a salon for the debutante, the nature of the merchandise shown therein being apparent from the name. There are rooms wherein fine fancy linens are shown, just as they would in a well-ordered home. On the furniture floor there are rooms which enable the prospective purchaser to see how tables and chairs and buffets and dressers will look in living room, dining room, chamber. There are rooms where fine china and glassware can be inspected amid their natural surroundings of fine napery and silverware and floral decorations. These rooms are richly carpeted. Their walls are in tasteful, subdued colors, and are further adorned with electric light brackets that are both useful and ornamental. One of the rooms in which exquisite table linens are displayed has the walls paneled in rich wood to the ceiling, as in an English manner of the Elizabethan or Stuart period. A fireplace, draperies, chairs, and other furniture, besides the dining and serving tables, carry out the period idea. And needless to say, the handsome rug on the floor is of an appropriate pattern. From the ceiling hang 2 chandeliers with electric lights and candle effect. The room in which French lingerie is shown is hung with tan taffeta draperies that harmonize with the blue floor covering and the boudoir furniture, which is in a delicate ivory tint. For the selection of morning apparel, there is a secluded salon with woodwork and furniture in gray enamel and with hangings in a wisteria tone. The diversity of the sources from which Marshall Field and Company draw their supplies of merchandise is indicated in a room wherein are represented Japan, China, India, and Korea. Rich gold-threaded embroideries, antique bronzes, and brasses are among the art objects on display in this interesting section. In the dress department, there is a room so spacious that its furnishings include 2 tables almost as large as those one finds in a director's room. This room is richly carpeted. The rear wall is formed of mahogany panels. The front is formed by showcases. At one end of the room is a small stage with a semicircular front. On this stage, at the time of our visit, there was a table on which was a vase of beautiful flowers. There were also 2 sumptuous armchairs. The other end of the room is formed by 2 arches, and in these were rich draperies artistically looped. The rooms fitted up for the display of furniture are 30 in number, and each is a gem in its own perfect way. For the businessman there is a room fitted and furnished as an office, one that a great financier or captain of industry would be glad to call his own. Yet these rooms, almost indescribable as they are in their beauty, originality, and refinement, are but a gilding of the lily. Throughout the store the appointments are of the most superb character, yet in perfect good taste. For example, the carpeting laid in numerous sections of the store, if laid end to end in a width of 27 inches, would measure no less than 54 miles. Unique also is the woodwork which holds the mirrors surrounding the pillars in certain of the garment sections. At the corners of such pillars, the woodwork is formed into a hollow curve, and from the floor to the cornice of the woodwork, there runs, apart from the main woodwork, a fluted column with a carved capital which joins the cornice. And then the size and the extent of the various sections. Only a dry goods or department store man or woman perhaps can adequately appreciate this characteristic of Marshall Field and Company. Taking them at random, where one can see such world-famous laces, hosiery, handkerchiefs, toilet goods, but it would be useless to go through the list. The extent of the store itself is evidence of the space which each stock is accorded. Thus, 23 years ago, what is now probably the most extensive furniture section in the world consisted of one small room in which were handled furniture, upholstery, bedding, and blankets. The room in question had a floor space of about 14,000 square feet. A space of only 3,000 feet was devoted to furniture. Moreover, the furniture in question was all of antique character. In 1898, greatly enlarged space was given to antique and domestic furniture. Since that time, there has been a gradual expansion of this section until it now occupies an aggregate area considerably more than the entire city block. The lengths to which Marshall Field and Company go in the effort to make their store attractive to the public are exemplified in the fact that throughout the furniture section the floor is carpeted. This is true indeed of almost all the selling sections throughout the firm's retail store. The furniture section, as already stated, includes no less than 30 display rooms, all of which are furnished in the most complete manner, showing fully equipped dining rooms, living rooms, chambers, etc. One of the extensive divisions of the section is that which is devoted to furniture for outdoor and porch purposes. To this class of furniture, 17,000 square feet of floor space are devoted. One of the features of this section is a sun parlor and porch fitted up in realistic style. There is also a section devoted to the sale of furniture for children. While due attention is given to furniture of modern production for all purposes in the home, the office, and the hotel, antique furniture continues to be a noteworthy factor in the section. In order that such furniture may be shown in proper surroundings, rooms that themselves are genuine antiques are provided. One of these rooms is walled in the wainscoting, to use the old-fashioned word, or paneling as we call it, taken from an ancient mansion in Glasgow, Scotland. Another room is paneled in wood taken from an old mansion in London. This is known as the deal room because of the name given in England to the kind of wood of which the paneling is composed. Equally antique in its atmosphere, but of modern construction, is a room paneled in oak and with accessories in the style of the period of the Stuart kings of England. A spacious room is provided for assembling before a customer all the decorations and fittings for a room, furniture, draperies, rugs, etc. These are collected at the time and for the purpose from a number of sections. In another room, representatives of the home decorating branch of the section suggest to prospective customers plans and ideas. The results of these conversations are submitted to the interested customer in the form of watercolor drawings or pen and ink sketches. These designs are produced by artists who work in another room close at hand. In the room in which the conferences are held between customers and the section's home decoration experts, it was interesting to note a list in large type of the various things a decorator must bear in mind during the course of such discussions. In the toy section, there are employed no less than 100 salespeople. Especially are toys an advertised feature just prior to the 4th of July on the ground that thoughtful and progressive parents prefer to give their children toys at that time rather than fireworks. Easter, also being a gift season, is recognized as an especially favorable time for the selling of toys. And now we're going to go on to another chapter called The Store for Men. Another step forward. The buildings covering the block bound by State, Washington, and Randolph Streets and Wabash Avenue, extensive and lofty though they are, form but a part of the Marshall Field and Company retail establishment. In the spring of 1914, the important step was taken of separating the menswear business from the rest of the store. For this purpose, Marshall Field and Company had just completed a 21-story building with basement and sub-basement immediately across Washington Street on the corner of Wabash Avenue. Here, as in the main store, the floor is laid in marble tiles. The floor cases and the bases of all fixtures are of a dark green marble, beautifully streaked with gray. The completeness of the provision made for supplying men's needs is indicated by the fact that in addition to the usual lines of furnishings, hats, gloves, and the like, there is a spacious section carrying fancy leather goods of all kinds, and another handling all sorts of jewelry for the use of men. That careful consideration has been given what a man might want to purchase in the store for men is proven by the fact that on the 5th floor there is a line of trunks and bags of the most serviceable character placed there to accommodate the man who is in a hurry and has not time to go over to the traveler's luggage department in the main store. On the 2nd or mezzanine floor is a most extensive line of footwear of all kinds, together with underwear and a custom tailoring department. The 3rd floor carries the regular lines of clothing, while on the 4th are special or seasonable lines, summer clothes, at the proper period in overcoats in the fall and winter, together with all kinds of sportswear. The 5th floor supplies men's needs in connection with sports. The range of auto supplies is complete, from a monkey wrench to a camp trailer. For fishing, golf, and other sports, the man's needs are equally well taken care of. The 6th floor houses the men's grill, a delightful club-like restaurant where at noon every weekday may be found business and professional men of wide acquaintance and reputation not only in Chicago but in other centers. The visitor, therefore, is quite likely in lunching there to meet accidentally a man from his hometown and naturally is impressed with the appeal which the field store has for men all over this country. The grill with its kitchen occupies the entire floor and is lighted by windows on 2 sides by a semi-indirect electrical system and also from a dome of softly colored glass. The floor is tiled in marble. The square pillars are enclosed in a considerable height in dark mahogany, and the walls are similarly paneled. The menus and services are of the best, and the chairs are of the cozy arm variety, which invite one to enjoy an after-luncheon cigar, prolong a chat, or devote one's attention to a business conference. A striking feature of this men's grill is the great central fountain in polished marble and metal. The water falls in a shower around the edges of a bowl from the center of which rises a low pillar surmounted by a polished sphere. The water falls into a second and larger basin, and then into a still larger receptacle, which is circular in form and rises 18 inches or more from the floor. The store for men is connected with the main store by a tunnel under Washington Street, and having viewed the conveniences supplied for the men, let us proceed into the main store. Take one of the numerous elevators, there are 92 of them in the retail premises, and visit the tea and grill rooms, where women and men also may have their hunger and thirst appeased. These are located on the 7th floor and occupy a space of 100,000 square feet. Not only luncheon, but afternoon tea is also served. As many as 3,900 persons may be served at one time, and in addition to the usual forms of luncheon, one may order in advance a table meal for a large party. These specially ordered luncheons may be served in booths or in private dining rooms. In many instances, conventions and clubs have taken advantage of this service, though with such large numbers, one of the very large rooms usually occupied by the general public is devoted to this purpose. The larger rooms or tea rooms proper, being situated on the wide gallery which runs around one of the light wells or rotundas, have an unusually spacious and lofty air, and as already mentioned, they have the benefit of the wonderful light effects provided by the dome, which forms a large part of the ceiling. One of the most attractive rooms, perhaps, is what is known as the Walnut Room or the South Grill Room. A large pool or basin in the center, surrounded by palm ferns and other plants, with a tall palm in the center, gives a peculiar charm to this beautiful room. Then there is the Narcissus Fountain Room. The fountain is of marble in a chaste and somewhat severe design. This room is a favorite for afternoon tea as well as for luncheon purposes. The smallest room of the group is known as the Wedgwood Room, being furnished and decorated in the blue and white that is reminiscent of the famous Wedgwood pottery. It seats about 125 people and is in demand not only for luncheon and afternoon tea, but also as a breakfast room for the use of early shoppers and out-of-town visitors. Not only are the Marshall Field and Company tea rooms noted far and wide for what they serve and the way they serve it, they also comply with requests from customers for information as to how any especially acceptable dish is made. So great was the number of requests for one recipe that the firm had it printed on a card. Of this one recipe, over 15,000 copies were thus distributed. No visitor to the tea rooms or men's grill can fail to be impressed with these words, which were printed on the menu: a store of service, surface and merchandise, service and conduct. And so with that, my beautiful friends, we're going to leave the magical world of Marshall Fields. You know what I loved so much about reading this was I remember both as a little girl getting to go to the tea rooms and also during my internship having to set up AV equipment at the Narcissus Room or the Wedgwood Room where they would do trainings, and everything was always done with such a flourish. It really brings my heart joy to share these memories with you and explore the history of this grand department store that was a part of my upbringing. And I'm glad to get to share it with you. Maybe as you drift off to sleep, you will have an opportunity to go into your own Wayback Machine and find some of your earlier life miracles and experiences coming forward to warm your heart to. So, I wish you a good night's sleep. The angels will stay with you. You are precious and you are loved, and I am deeply grateful for you. Blessings to you.